Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're checking out the Specna Prime AEG. It's essentially the new high-end flagship of Specna Arms. Now, they sent me an Edge 2.0 a little over a year ago now, and I really liked it. It was a fun gun, but I still thought it needed a little bit of refinement. The Specna Prime is that refinement, and then some.
Line of fire.
This is the Specna Prime 03. They essentially use the same, more or less, externals as the Edge 2.0. I noticed a couple of things changed, but they're minor, so I'm probably not going to mention them. But it is more or less the same externally. Internally is where all the changes have happened, and I'll tell you, they are some big changes. Before we get too enamored with all the gun, let's check out everything it comes with, because it's quite a bit. The gun comes with 3 different springs. The original that's in the box that shoots a little over that 400 FPS mark, that field mark. An M135 spring, so if you want to be that DMR dude, and an M90 spring, which actually shoots a really soft indoor, so you can right away use this airsoft gun at an indoor field. An obligatory cleaning rod, a small plastic card, which is actually pretty durable. I like this. It's all the options on your MOSFET, so if you need to change it on the fly, you can pretty easily do that. A Dean's or T-type to Tamiya adapter. This is if you're still living in the past and not using a Dean's connector battery. A pretty large speed loader. I like it when they give you the larger speed loaders. You can actually fully load a magazine, because the mags it comes with are about 125 rounds. This is, it says 155 round speed loader. I believe that. I'm used to the small ones where it doesn't have the kind of hump on the back. A piece of paper that's got a QR code to your manual. Another piece of paper that's got a bunch of QR codes. You can check out all Specna's other options for airsoft guns. A big sheet of stickers. These are always fun. A really great quality vertical foregrip. I didn't use this during gameplay or testing, but it's pretty hefty, got some weight to it, and it's kind of like the actual pistol grip on the airsoft gun, where you can pull these tabs down, and this is a rubber component, and you've got a little storage compartment in there too, so if you want to fit maybe a dozen Skittles in there, you can do that. And lastly, 2 mid-capacity magazines. These hold about 125 rounds apiece, and they can pretty easily keep up with the 25 round per second rate of fire that the gun is capable of. All right, we'll start with the stock of the airsoft gun and move our way forward. It comes with a standard kind of B5 style crane stock. This is your battery compartment. You pull off the 2 tabs. It's got a nice rubberized back to it. And you have your battery compartment back here. You can fit most batteries back here. I was able to fit a couple of different 11-1s back here without a problem. And you've got a Dean's or T-type connector sticking out as well. There are plenty of places to connect your sling as well. There are a couple of QD slots on either side of the back here. I use these during gameplay because I've got a 1-point sling from Magpul I really like. And you've also got clips on either side just in front of the buffer tube. So if you've got a clip or any kind of sling that can attach to this, you've got options there too. And just to get this out of the way up front, there's a little sling loop, just kind of your normal M4A1 style loop here. The ESA2 quick change spring system is pretty straightforward. I'm going to remove my crane stock, so it just slides right off of there. You'll unscrew your castle nut. When you get the gun, it's a little bit of force required to get that off. Push it forward and rotate it slightly. From there, you can unscrew the spring guide. And thankfully, all the springs it comes with are really short, so they're not going to fly out the back of your airsoft gun when you take the spring guide out. In front of the stock, you have your really great quality metal receiver. I like these. They're solid. I like the finish on them. They're a nice matte black. And you've also got your Rock River Arms trades. These are etched in, and they're really, really solid. I do love the way these look. On the right side, you've got a little hollow foil sticker here and a little sticker just on the mag well there. It does have a specific serial number for this airsoft gun as well. Just a really neat addition to the airsoft gun. I really like something I did to one of my firearms as well. This does have an extended charging handle, so it's very nice and simple to pull back if you need to. And of course, pulling the charging handle back, you expose your hop-up under the fake dust cover and bolt there. It is a rotary style hop-up, so you can pretty easily adjust your settings from there. The grip itself has an interesting angle to it, has some nice texturing on either side, and is also very comfortable. This particular model is the P03, so it comes with a Knights-ish style quad rail. There are a number of other models out there, so if you want different types of rails, stocks, and so on, or colors. The sights on this gun are pretty simple and straightforward. The rear one flips up, It's a simple detent, there is no spring tension behind it. It's adjustable for windage and it has two apertures, one small and one large. The front sight is your typical T-style front sight and is adjustable for elevation. Lastly, you do get a barrel with a 14mm negative thread. It's underneath the flash hider, which is pinned in place, so just a heads up, if you want to replace this with a metal flash hider or a suppressor, or tracer, or anything like that, you do need to remove this.
Alex, watch out. Thank you. Hit!
Now I can walk you through how to program your HAL MOSFET. It's pretty straightforward and reasonably simple. First off, we have your auto programming mode, so whatever setting you want your full auto switch setting to use. Your semi-fire mode, and you've got a couple of options here, including AEG and sniper mode, and binary, of course, which is pretty much in all the MOSFETs nowadays. Your trigger point, so essentially at what point your trigger will break when pulling. It's interesting that the 100% mark is kind of your hair trigger and your 20% is your fullest. Pre-cocking, I'm not going to demo that, but it does have the options for levels 1 through 6. And active braking simply has an on and off and there's no granularity to it. What's interesting about the HAL MOSFET is how you program it. It's a little bit different from most MOSFETs, so if I want to enter programming mode, I flick it like that from safe to semi to auto and back to safe in one really quick motion. And we currently have it on the first fire mode, which is the auto fire mode selection. In order to program any particular fire selection modes, so auto, fire, semi-auto, trigger point, we want it on the semi-auto selection setting. And in order to pick a more granular option under that selection, we'll put it on the full auto setting, and from there it's trigger pulls. So we've currently got it on auto fire mode. So I want to do a more granular selection on that, so I'm going to pull the trigger twice. And we've got it set to option 3, which is our 3-round burst. I'm going to go back to our fire selection mode, go to option 2, which is the semi-selection mode, move it into full auto, and I'm going to pull the trigger once, which sets it to binary. And next I'm going to go to the trigger point, which is essentially the break point. I will go into that and program it. And I have it set to 100%, which is the 5 buzz setting. And now I'm going to leave the pre-cocking and the active braking as they are. So now I'm going to hold the trigger for a couple of seconds. And now my MOSFET should be programmed. So if I go to semi-auto, I'm now shooting in binary mode. But you pull the trigger once, it fires, you let off, and it fires again. If I go to full auto, it should be the 3-round burst. And it surely is.
Go for it. I'll keep an eye. Ooh, they're getting close. That'd be mean if we had to go different flags. I'm moving up on your right. Watch this guy on the right too. I'm gonna. Oh shit. Oh, is he? Okay.
Now we have the guts of the prime out, the gearbox, motor, hop-up, and barrel. We've already taken the spring and spring guide out because those are necessary to remove the gearbox from the body. The dark matter brushless motor. Brushless motors are kind of a not terribly new thing to the airsoft world, but they're kind of a new thing to a stock airsoft gun. There aren't too many out there. There's only a few options. So the fact that this is one of the least expensive airsoft guns, actually is the least expensive airsoft gun to have a brushless motor, that's a great thing. So D-type pinion, be really careful when you're disassembling this. The black motor pin came off pretty easily, but the red motor pin was really, really tough to get off. And I ended up having to bend the pin on the motor a little bit. So be really careful with these. If these go, I can imagine that'd be a terrible, awful, painful thing to replace. So just be cognizant when you're disassembling this airsoft gun. The inner barrel on this is a steel 6.03 barrel. It's a regular old M4 length, so pretty typical. This uses what's called the Magnus hop-up unit. It is actually a top-down center design. You can see when I adjust the drum here, there's an arm that pushes down on a railed plastic piece here that pushes directly on the hop-up bucking. The hop-up drum itself is numbered, so you can see where your hop is set. and it's a little loose, but it still clicks and stays in place reasonably well. I would like it to be a little bit more secure, so maybe a thicker O-ring would work a little bit better there. Although it's difficult to show on camera, I would strongly recommend cleaning your barrel when you get the gun. Usually you do this when you get an airsoft gun no matter what, but I noticed this one had a fair amount of debris in the barrel, so definitely give this a good thorough cleaning. Inside of the hop-up, you get the helium flat hop bucking, and forgive me, I'm having to read off my phone all these different names. You've got the Magnus hop-up, the helium bucking, the ether gearbox. Everything's got a particular name in the prime, so I gotta get all the branding right here. It is a flat hop, so there's no mound inside of the hop there. It's totally flat. And to pair with the helium flat hop, you get a flat nub there. So it is, in fact, a correct flat hop. The ESA2 quick change spring guide threads into the back of the receiver. The shaft itself is all steel, and it has a nice set of bearings behind it. The springs included with this gun, interestingly, are pretty short, and they are also linear springs. The Ether Gearbox has a really pretty beefy front end. It is all reinforced. You do get proper radiusing on the front and the back of the cylinder window, which is fantastic. On the left side of the gearbox, we've got slots here. We can see the pre-cocking settings, kind of give you an idea of your different settings where your pre-cocking piston will be. On the right side, we've got a little window for your angle of engagement. You can kind of see it there reasonably well. You probably need a flashlight to peek in there though. Thankfully, there's a window on the left side too, so if you need to decycle your gearbox and trip your anti-reversal latch, it's pretty easy to do. The gearbox uses a combination of bearings and bushings. They're all 8mm. Bushings on the spur gear, and it actually labels the gears here, which is really neat, and bearings on the bevel and sector gear. Lastly, before I open up the gearbox, there is a small adjustment screw here, and it actually is labeled on the side of the gearbox there, trigger adjustment. I did notice that I didn't have an Allen key small enough to fit this, and I've got some pretty small Allen keys, so just be aware. With the gearbox open here, let's go ahead and go through it. We'll start with the compression system. Seems all right, but definitely I think could be improved a little bit. What I'm seeing here is that the cylinder head could probably use a different O-ring on it. It seems to rock back and forth a little bit there. So the air seal, I'd probably give like a B. It's not perfect, but it's still reasonably good. The piston is a steel tooth rack piston with a polymer body. Second to last tooth is removed. The piston head is aluminum, and it is ported and also has bearings behind it as well. The cylinder, I always love these kind of ribbed cylinders. They make me feel like the cylinder is improved over a standard one. But anyway, the air volume on this one seems to be a little bit more than your regular old M4. The slot is a little bit farther back, so you probably just get a smidge more air volume, which in my book is always a good thing. It's also a pretty heavy cylinder, so it's not one of those really thin, less expensive aluminum cylinders that you might see around. The nozzle seats really nicely on the cylinder head. Gets a great seal. It doesn't rock or is not flimsy in the slightest. It is an excellent seal. It's an aluminum nozzle and also has an O-ring in the inside of it. The cylinder head is also aluminum, so it's a full aluminum compression set, which is great. 2 O-rings in there, although I may try and swap out these O-rings for slightly thicker ones so I get a slightly better seating in the cylinder. Lastly, that is a really flexible tappet plate. It's probably one of the most flexible tappet plates I've ever seen. The gear set is a 16:1 ratio steel, so it's a little bit higher speed than your standard 18:1 gear set that you typically find in most airsoft guns. You do have a sector delayer there, which is great. Specna's flat face trigger. Seems like everyone's going to flat face triggers now. It's kind of the thing. You've got an adjustment screw right here, so if you want to adjust your starting point at your trigger pull, you've got the ability to pretty easily do that. Let's go ahead and check the shimming. So I'm going to put my gearbox back together here. I'm going to hold it pretty tight. I'm going to screw it back together. Shimming sounds pretty decent, but let's see what the height on the gears is like. The sector gear, I'm getting as close to no movement as you can get, which I think is a good thing. The spur gear, I get a little bit of movement. I could probably refine that a smidge. And the bevel gear, I think is about right where you want it. There's just the slightest bit of play, which is just perfect. The height between the sector and the spur gear looks pretty good. Since these gears are black inside of a black gearbox, you really need a light to look down in there. It looks like the meshing and the height between the bevel and spur is pretty good, so I'm going to call that good. The shimming on this gearbox is really good. There's probably a small amount of correction I can make with the spur, but it's so minor, I'm really not terribly concerned. I'm going to give this shim job an A. The HAL 9000, HAL MOSFET, got to get the branding right there, is an interesting combination of what looks like an IR sensor for the mechanical components and small micro switches for the selection components. You've got two here.
In the trench, right side, past the barrel. One's hit. Oh, hit.
I tested this gun out at Nighthawk Airsoft this last weekend, and it was a lot of fun. It was an interesting day. We had, I think, 150 or 200 players out there. I took it out for a game and I ran about 2,000 rounds through it, and I'll tell you, it's an interesting feeling and shooting gun. I think 95% of that is more or less due to the brushless motor. I've been airsofting for probably about 18 years now, and I've never used an airsoft gun with a brushless motor. They've been obviously on the market for a while. I've had plenty of clients and friends use guns with brushless motors, but this is the first one I had used. And I'll tell you, it really changes how an airsoft gun shoots compared to a regular old magnet brush motor. It's a very different feel. You get a different response to it, a different rate of fire, and it is very enjoyable. The shooting experience for this was pretty good. I tested it with 0.32 gram BBs, which are kind of my standard go-to BB. I've got tons of bottles of those, so I'm going to be sticking to those for a little while until I exhaust them. This gun probably had about 180, 200 foot range. It was excellent. It really got BBs out there. I did notice once that it seemed like the hop-up seemed to de-adjust a little bit, so I did have to readjust it kind of on the fly during play on the field. The internals of this gun are really where it shines. All the different components marry pretty well. I was getting really surprisingly consistent groupings from this airsoft gun, especially at a distance. Even at that max range, you can easily put just about every BB on a man-sized target, which was really, really nice. And a number of people actually commented on the surprising range this gun had. I was able to stand on some mounds in between trenches and fling BBs pretty far, and they were surprised BBs were getting out to them.
Here, you seen this thing? It's the Specna Prime. Light one for heavy. Should be semi-wound.
It's cool as fuck.
Yeah, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha.
Now, there are a few things I would like to refine or change still. This isn't a perfect airsoft gun, but it is an exceptional airsoft gun, I believe, for the price. It's got a lot of wobble to it, and I know it's probably mostly due to this particular gun. You've got a cowbell up front here for the sling loop. You've got a rail system that's got a little bit of wobble. These particular rail covers, being aftermarket, have no wobble to them on the rail, but the ones that came with did wobble as well, so it's kind of an amplified wobble on the rail. And then you've also got the stock, a little bit of wobble, but not too much, and the fake bolt catch release lever there. It also makes a lot of noise rattling around. But I think for the price you're paying, this particular model was in the upper 300s. A lot of the models are in the low 400s, so there's kind of a price range depending on the model you pick and the rail and such. I feel like these should be pretty tight and shouldn't be making a lot of wobbly noise, but that's kind of a nitpick. It's one of those things you can take care of on the user end as well. You could tighten this down as well as the rail system. You could remove this, and there's also ways to make the stock not wobble. The cylinder head sealing with the cylinder could be refined a little bit. Maybe some thicker O-rings would go a long ways, but I'm not sure it would make a big difference because they're both static parts. A thicker O-ring on the hop-up drum for the rotary style hop-up. I did put a thicker O-ring on it myself, and it stayed in place pretty well. So there are ways to take care of those things, but I think out of the box, it'd be really nice if they were already taken care of. All in all, this was still a really fun airsoft gun to use. I used a Titan 1100 mod 1200 milliamp hour battery with a 25C, and this thing was shooting about 25 rounds a second on the field with a surprising response, mainly due to that brushless motor. Now, I have to give this gun a final grade. I'm gonna give it a 9.5 out of 10. Like I said, there's some things I would change, but they're not the end of the world. They're not that dire. And the fun factor for how enjoyable this gun is really makes up for it. Thanks for watching, guys, and a big thank you to Specna Arms for sending this out. This thing was a blast, a very different feeling airsoft gun to use, and I think you guys will enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next review.